It was barely 7:15 a.m. when Elijah stepped out of his car, a late-model Prius coated in the pale dust of freeway travel. The construction site loomed just beyond the chain-link fence, skeletal beams rising into the morning sky. His shoes crunched over gravel as he approached the gate, portfolio tucked under one arm, hard hat in hand. He wore plain khakis, a navy fleece, and glasses that slid a little too easily down the bridge of his nose. Nothing about him shouted authority. He didn't look like the kind of man used to being obeyed. Just as he reached the opening in the fence, a voice barked out, "Hey, no deliveries before 8. Turn around." A tall man in a neon vest and scuffed boots stood near a stack of pallets, clipboard in hand. He didn't ask Elijah's name, didn't ask why he was here, just looked at his skin, his car, his quiet walk, and made a decision. Elijah paused, adjusted his glasses. "I'm not here to deliver anything," he said. The foreman took a few steps forward, mouth already curving in that tight, familiar smile people used when they thought they were being patient. "Then you're on the wrong site, buddy. Unless you're looking for work, in which case you need to check in over by the trailers. Labor pools on the south end." Elijah didn't answer right away, just looked past the foreman at the rising framework. It was his design, his layout. He could already see one of the steel beams was 3 inches off center. "Is that column marked D7? He asked quietly, pointing. The foreman blinked. "Why?" Elijah just looked at him, not challenging, not mocking, just waiting. The foreman narrowed his eyes. "Yeah, it's D7, he said slowly. "Why do you care?" Elijah stepped forward, calmly, his portfolio still tucked under his arm. He kept his tone even. "Because it's not aligned with the foundation grid. And if it's not corrected before the second floor decking goes up, your team's going to have a load-bearing problem." The foreman snorted, a quick, dismissive sound. "Oh, right. Let me guess. You helped pour the footings? You think you know better than the engineers now?" One of the workers nearby looked over, curious, wiping sweat from his brow even though the day hadn't heated up yet. Another paused mid-smoke. Elijah stayed quiet for a moment, then opened the flap on his portfolio. Inside were rolled prints, crisp, official, bearing the logo of the architecture firm contracted for the job. The foreman didn't look. He just crossed his arms and took another step forward, the tone in his voice sharpening. "Look, I don't have time to argue with a guy wandering in here without clearance. If you're trying to get hired, fine. I'll call the site manager. Otherwise, get back in your car and—" "I am the site manager." The voice didn't come from Elijah. Came from the trailer steps. A woman in jeans and a tailored button-down shirt was walking toward them, badge clipped to her belt. She wasn't smiling. She had a radio in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. The foreman's mouth shut. She stopped beside Elijah, gave him a nod. "Morning, Mr. Green. Glad you made it. Sorry about the welcome." She turned to the foreman. "He's not a walk-on. He's the lead architect." There was no sound, just the wind brushing loose dust across the gravel. The foreman didn't speak right away. His mouth opened, then closed again. A faint flush crept up his neck. The clipboard in his hand lowered slightly, fingers tightening around the edges. Elijah didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just met the man's eyes, steady and quiet. The woman beside him, Carla, her name tag read, gestured toward the framed building. "He's here to walk the site and review the structural progress before we greenlight the next stage. You'll be assisting him this morning." The foreman looked at her, then back at Elijah. He nodded, but it was stiff, mechanical. "Sure," he said. "Didn't realize." Elijah gave a small, measured response. "You weren't supposed to." They started walking. Carla peeled off toward the trailers, already flipping through messages on her radio. Elijah and the foreman moved in silence past the machinery and workers, their boots crunching the gravel and plywood boards. It wasn't a long walk, but it felt longer than it needed to. "You want to start at the framing, or?" the foreman finally asked, voice lower now. "Framing," Elijah replied. They reached the steel columns. Elijah stopped beside D7, pulled the measuring laser from his belt, and checked the offset. 3¼ inches out, he said. The foreman didn't argue this time. He just stared at the beam, like seeing it for the first time. "You were right." He paused. "Guess you've been on a lot of these." Elijah looked at the structure, not the man. "I designed this one." The foreman stood very still. "You designed it?" Elijah nodded once. "Every beam, every joint. The city wanted a space that could handle mixed-use loads, retail on the first level, residential above. That required a split-core design, which is why that offset matters. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. The foreman scratched the back of his neck. His gaze drifted from Elijah to the structure and back again, as if trying to reconcile two images that didn't match. Didn't expect, he trailed off. What? Elijah asked. Not sharp, just quiet. Open. The foreman hesitated. Didn't expect the architect to look like you. Elijah didn't flinch. He just looked at him, really looked, until the silence felt heavy enough to do the explaining for him. One of the younger workers nearby had stopped pretending to be busy. He stood behind a stack of drywall, watching them both, brow furrowed. Elijah spoke again, measured. Assumption's a powerful thing, especially when it walks before truth. The foreman didn't argue. Couldn't. His posture had shifted. Not apologetic, not yet, but unsure in a way that hadn't been there 15 minutes ago. Elijah unrolled a section of the blueprints and laid it over the plywood sheet resting against the framing. Let's walk through the corrections, he said. The foreman nodded, quieter now. Yeah, let's do that. They moved slowly from beam to beam, Elijah pointing out misalignments, weight distribution issues, and anchor points that didn't match the structural plan. The foreman followed, scribbling notes on his clipboard, nodding in silence. It wasn't just the measurements. It was the way Elijah spoke, direct, clear, but without condescension. There was no need to prove anything. He already had. By the time they reached the stairwell framework, two other workers had drifted closer, listening in. One of them, a guy in a faded beanie with calloused hands and paint-speckled boots, finally spoke up. You're really the lead architect? Elijah looked over and gave a small nod. That's right. The guy's eyes lingered on the plans, then back at Elijah. Huh. It wasn't disrespectful. Just surprised. Like something was reordering in his head in real time. The foreman cleared his throat. So, about the D7 column, we'll have to adjust before the concrete pour tomorrow. Yeah, Elijah said. It's fixable. But you'll need to recheck the laser grid first. Your surveyor may have been off. I'll talk to him, the foreman muttered. They stood there for a moment, sunlight warming the exposed concrete, the sounds of hammering echoing behind them. Elijah folded up the blueprints. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. Back near the site trailers, the project team had started to gather. Carla stood by the whiteboard, checking her watch as foremen and supervisors trickled in, boots caked in dust, hard hats under one arm. Elijah entered last, nodding a quiet greeting as he set his blueprints on the table. No one asked who he was now. They knew. The foreman, his name was Rick, they finally learned, stood off to the side, arms crossed, unusually silent. His usual ease was gone, replaced by something closer to reflection. Carla looked up. Mr. Green, ready to walk them through the next stage? Elijah stepped forward, clicked the penlight on his keyring, pointed to a structural diagram pinned to the board. Steel adjustments on grid lines D through F. You'll need to shore temporarily before the HVAC layout begins. If not, we're going to be chasing rework through 3 subcontractors. Someone in the back murmured in agreement. Another nodded, scribbling on a notepad. Elijah's voice stayed calm, precise. Each instruction landed with quiet weight. There was no flash, no raised voice, just clarity, confidence, command of the work. By the time he finished, no one was checking their phone. No one was talking over him. Rick cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. I made a bad call this morning, he said, voice low. Didn't ask questions, just assumed. He didn't look at Elijah, not directly. But I was wrong. That's on me. No applause. No grand gesture. Just silence. And wait. After the meeting, the crew dispersed, some heading to their zones, others lingering in small clusters, quieter than usual. Elijah stood by the site trailer, sipping coffee from a paper cup Carla had handed him. He watched the team filter out, their conversations softer now, more deliberate. Rick approached, his steps slower than before. Mind if I ask you something, he said, voice low. Elijah gave a small nod. Go ahead. Rick looked at the ground for a second, then up. You ever get tired of it? Elijah raised an eyebrow. Being mistaken. Over and over. Walking into places and having to prove it every time. The question hung there not as an excuse but as something closer to understanding. Or maybe the beginning of it. Elijah didn't answer right away. He looked past Rick to the site, the framework reaching skyward. Not tired, he said finally. Just done waiting for the world to catch up. I show up. I do the work. People adjust. Rick nodded slowly. Still, he said, it shouldn't have taken that long. Elijah didn't correct him. He didn't say it shouldn't take anything. He just let the silence stretch. And Rick stood in it. Later that afternoon, Elijah found a quiet corner in the trailer away from the clatter of tools and footsteps. He opened his laptop, connected to the project database, and began reviewing the inspection logs. His fingers moved methodically, checking signatures, timestamps, and subcontractor notes. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Elijah Green. Mr. Green, this is Mark Dillon. I'm the regional director for the contractor overseeing the site. Elijah leaned back slightly in his chair. Yes, Mark? What can I do for you? I heard about this morning. A pause. About what happened when you arrived. Elijah said nothing. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. That's not how we want our people treated. Elijah's voice stayed calm. And yet they still do. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll be speaking with Rick, Dylan said. There'll be a formal report. Elijah glanced at the window. A worker passed by, hauling rebar. The sound of steel on steel rang through the yard. That's your decision, Elijah replied. But I'm not here to punish. I'm here to build. Dylan exhaled. Still, you shouldn't have to navigate this. Not just to do your job. Elijah closed the laptop gently. You're right. But I do. So let's make sure the structure goes up straight. The rest, that's on you. He ended the call. Sat in silence. Outside, the framework kept rising. By the next morning, changes were already visible on the site. The D7 column had been repositioned. New laser measurements were underway. Workers moved with a new kind of caution, not fear, but awareness. Rick stood by the column, overseeing the correction, tape measure in one hand, radio clip to his shoulder. He wasn't barking orders the way he usually did. His tone had shifted, less commanding, more collaborative. Elijah watched from a short distance. He didn't interrupt. Eventually, Rick walked over. Columns fixed, he said. And I had the crew triple-check the anchor points on E-line. No shortcuts this time. Elijah nodded once. Good. Rick hesitated. I also talked to the team this morning, he added. Told them to cut the jokes. The comments. Told them we don't guess who people are based on what they drive or what they're wearing. He looked at Elijah. I didn't use your name. Just said someone showed us how to do better. Elijah's eyes stayed on the column. That's how it starts, he said quietly. Rick gave a small nod and walked back to his crew. A few minutes later, one of the younger workers, mid-20s, maybe, approached Elijah with a measuring rod in hand. Mr. Green, he said, slightly unsure. You mind showing me how you spotted that D7 was off? I want to learn. Elijah turned to him, finally smiling. Sure. Let's take a look. They knelt beside the column, gravel pressing into their knees, the younger worker holding the measuring rod steady while Elijah checked the calibration. Start with the grid lines, Elijah explained, pointing to the site map clipped to his tablet. Everything on this plan has to answer to those lines. Doesn't matter how perfect a cut looks, if it's in the wrong place, it fails. The younger man nodded, absorbing every word. Elijah moved deliberately, letting the worker handle the tools, correcting only when necessary. There was no lecture, just quiet instruction, the kind that builds respect instead of demanding it. A few feet away, Rick watched from behind a stack of plywood. He didn't interrupt, just observed. Nearby, two more workers edged closer. Not pretending to be casual anymore, just watching. Elijah kept teaching. Sometimes the flaw isn't visible. You feel it in the structure, the way a floor creaks where it shouldn't, or how the load shifts under wind shear. That's what you look for. The younger man furrowed his brow. You always see that stuff? Just by walking around. Elijah looked up at him. I've learned to see what others overlook. That's the job. The worker nodded, thoughtful. Wish more people saw like that. Elijah didn't respond. He didn't have to. The lesson had already landed. Word spread fast. Not about the confrontation. No one really talked about that, not directly. But everyone on site knew something had shifted. By noon, more crew members were double-checking measurements before calling inspections. Subcontractors started asking questions instead of assuming. Even the crane operator, usually half listening during safety briefings, stayed unusually still when Elijah reviewed the next phase of steel placement. It wasn't fear. It was respect. Earned not from titles or threats, but presence. Later, while Elijah reviewed updated schematics near the staging area, Carla walked over. Been a quiet day, she said, sipping from a thermos. Elijah gave a small smile. Sometimes quiet is good. She nodded, watching the workers in the distance. Whatever happened yesterday, it's working. They're listening. I've never seen Rick ask for input. Not from anyone. Elijah shrugged slightly. He didn't need to. Until he did. Carla looked at him. Did you know you were going to change the site just by showing up? No, he said. But I knew I had to show up anyway. They stood there a moment, not saying much. Just watching a structure rise, beam by beam, under a new kind of silence. That evening, back in his hotel room, Elijah sat at the small desk, the blueprints rolled and clipped beside his laptop. He logged into the firm's internal portal, filed his site report, then opened his email. One unread message stood out. Subject, today. It was from Rick. Elijah clicked it open. Asterisk Mr. Green. I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for the corrections. For how you handled it. I was wrong. And I didn't know how wrong until I saw the crew watching. You didn't humiliate me. You let me figure it out myself. That matters. I've worked on a lot of sites. Seen a lot of people show up with authority and throw it around. You didn't. And that landed harder than any speech would have. I've got work to do. I know that. But you gave me a reason to start. Rick asterisk. Elijah read it twice. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back, stared at the ceiling for a moment, and let the silence of the room settle around him. He hadn't come here to teach, or correct, or be a symbol. He'd come to check steel alignment. But maybe this was part of the job too. The next morning, the crew assembled early. Earlier than usual. Rick stood near the center, holding a set of new blueprints. Not rolled. Laid flat across a temporary table with weights on each corner. Elijah approached from the east side of the site, hard hat in hand, his stride calm. Rick saw him, gave a short nod. I thought maybe today we walk it again. Together. With the team. Elijah looked at the blueprints. Then at the workers gathering around, some holding coffees, others hands in pockets, watching with curiosity but no mockery. All right, Elijah said. Let's walk it. Rick started pointing. Here's where we corrected the alignment. And here's where we nearly missed a foundation sleeve for plumbing. James caught it after yesterday's notes. James, a younger crew member, nodded shyly from the back. Elijah looked down, reviewing the markups. Then looked up at the group. Any of you see anything off, say it. Doesn't matter if it's your first week or your 10th year. This is our structure. If it fails, we all answer for it. They nodded. Not out of obligation, but agreement. One man raised his hand. I think we need to shift the equipment laydown zone. Too close to the future drainage trench. Rick turned. You're right. Let's flag that before lunch. Elijah didn't smile. But he felt something settle in place. Not a dramatic change. Just a new alignment. Later that day, Carla posted a notice on the break room wall, an internal memo from the parent firm. Nothing flashy. No bold headlines. Just a paragraph. Asterisk reminder to all project sites, representation matters not just in leadership but on every site visit, in every role. Respect isn't earned by appearance. It's practiced by default. Special acknowledgement to Elijah Green for his consistent professionalism and leadership on the Pacific Grove project. Asterisk. Some workers stopped and read it. Others glanced and moved on. But it stayed there. No one tore it down. No one joked about it. At lunch, Elijah ate alone at first. Then James pulled a folding chair beside him, no words, just company. 10 minutes later, another crew member joined. Then 2 more. They talked work, weather, a baseball score. But no one looked at Elijah like he didn't belong. And no one asked what he drove. That afternoon, someone left a folded note on the edge of the plans table. Scrawled in pen. Didn't see you coming. Won't forget you were here. No name. Just truth. The final inspection passed late Friday. Elijah stood near the north corner of the site, watching the last of the rebar bundles being loaded into place, the structure now solid, squared, and ready to rise. The sky was starting to dim, just a hint of gold brushing the frame. Rick walked over, slower this time. No clipboard. Just a quiet presence. We're good here, he said. Elijah nodded. I know. They stood for a moment in silence. Rick shifted, then added, wasn't just about the columns, you know. Elijah looked at him. I figured, he said. Rick's jaw tightened. Not from tension, just from everything he didn't quite know how to say. You changed something, he muttered. Not loud. Just moved the whole center of the place. Elijah didn't respond. He just looked at the beams. Strong. Aligned. Ready to carry weight. Carla appeared near the trailer, waving a farewell. Elijah nodded back, then turned toward his car. Before he opened the door, Rick called out, you coming back when it's finished? Elijah paused. I'll know if it's standing straight, he said over his shoulder. And with that he got in. Drove off. No fanfare. No speech. Just the structure behind him, quiet, solid, better. And a team of people who would never look at a quiet man in a fleece the same way again.